Hello and welcome to Startup School AI Agentic with Google Cloud. My name is Alejandro Alferez and I'm a Google Cloud architect working within Google Cloud with startups like yourselves. Today we're going to chat about how to start with Google Cloud and how to build your first AI agents on Google Cloud. But for that, we need to go over the essentials. And this is a starter session for startups and developers. Let's get started. Here's a quick agenda and a rundown of what we're going to go through. First, we're going to hit what is Google Cloud. Then second, Google Cloud definitions. Third, we're going to go over how we manage this cloud identities. Then we're going to go into Cloud IAM, which is how you manage that in GCP per se. Then we're going to look at administrative tools, and then we're going to close off with AI with Google. This agenda, it's an overview. I want you guys to feel like you can keep up with the slides, but I'm going to do demos in between the sections. All right. So let's get started. What is Google Cloud? As everybody knows, Google has more than 9 services with more than 1 billion users each. That is a crazy amount of users, specifically that everybody uses it somehow or another. Some way or another, you could use Maps or YouTube, Android devices. Google Photos is a big one. But more importantly, like something like Chrome, right? To serve your web services through Chrome. And we know how to do this at scale. This is something that we've done for a long time, and we know how to scale. So everything that you see here runs in the same infrastructure as our Google Cloud Platform, which we'll be talking about later today. So this is a couple of numbers that we have around our infrastructure. So we have over 41 cloud regions, 124 zones. So that each region has at least 3 zones or more. Then we have edge locations, which help us with something like networking to improve our speed, our latency. Then we have CDN locations, dedicated interconnect locations, which we're going to go over later videos. And then we have over 20 plus Google data centers, and that is a lot of compute. Very important, we also have renewable projects within our regions. So that is very important for Google Cloud and Google as a company. And then we also have 33 subsea cables that connect each continent with each other. So this is just to give you an idea of where all of our regions are. And there's a couple that are not here, but are still in development, and they're future regions. So we keep adding more regions to the map, which is very important for our customers worldwide, and keep that latency as low as possible for all of our services. All right. Here are some of the connectivity that we run across regions. Obviously, we have the edge points of presence. And like I said, they're not necessarily regions. It's not like a major data center, but it's something that connects or brings that network connectivity closer to an area that necessarily doesn't have a region. So, for example, we have Colombia here with Bogota. You have a point of presence that enables services to be low latency to that region. And then we have the major regions here in Santiago de Chile, and then Brazil, Sao Paulo. The same for the rest of the continents, but this is our network, regions, and point of presence. This is very impressive because if you see here, this is where we lay our own subsea cables. You see a little shark having some snack on subsea cable, but we lay the cables and we also maintain them. So all the network infrastructure that we lay on Google Cloud is maintained and provided by Google as a whole. That's why our latency is so low. Google is the number 4 server worldwide manufacturer, and that's right. We also manufacture our own servers. So if you see some of these servers not necessarily look like something like Dell or HP because they are basically open, right? So you see some of these servers are just the slides directly into the rack rather than have a box and have the motherboard and all the instruments inside of the box. We keep the cooling as efficient as possible, so that's why it doesn't have even an enclosing. Some of these are enclosed, but most of them are open, just like this. And also, we wouldn't be Google if we didn't like to color code all of our connections here in an example. I'm going to quickly jump to what our shared responsibility matrix looks like. So we have SaaS, we have PaaS, and we have IaaS. So the first one is software as a service, where if you see down in the legend, Google manages almost everything about it, right? All the way up to usage. You manage the access policies and the content, Something like Gmail and Drive are an example of software as a service. Then we jump to something like platform as a service. We have BigQuery. Um, that is something that you manage, but you have the control over the usage, the access policies, and the content. However, this is something that we call serverless, where you have to take care of just that, and they will take care of the deployment and everything that entitles bring you a service that constitutes a platform. And then lastly, we have infrastructure as service that will give you the building blocks for you to build whatever you need to build. So if your application requires total control over your identity or your web application security, you have that ability under your belt. So if you're familiar with cloud, this should come as naturally as possible to you, but it's just a quick reminder of what each of those categories are. All right, so let's jump into some Google Cloud definitions. And this is very important and also very exciting because sometimes when you get into cloud, it is extremely important to understand what each of those definitions mean, because a lot of the security and the infrastructure setup relies on knowing what each of those definitions are. All right, so let's start. The first is the resource manager. So in Google Cloud, we like to distribute our infrastructure by four different terms, right? So the first one, we have the hierarchy head, which would be the organizational node. This would be the equivalent of the name of your company, the domain, the name domain, and this is basically where your company will live in Google Cloud, right? So it manages everything, right? So everything lives underneath the organization. The next step would be folders, which would be either departments or teams or products that you may have under your company. These will host something that is called projects. And projects are actually where your resources live, right? So your resource is a VM, is storage, is any service that GCP provides will live inside a project. Now, you can have folders within folders, but you can have a structure as simple as organization, folder, project, and that's it. You don't need to get fancy to start with. You can be as clear and simple as possible with this type of hierarchy. This is just an example, but you can have folders within folders if you have products within one team or you have different departments within different departments. Then we have organizations. Organizations, let's double click on that. You have the root node, which is, I'll give you an example, blank.io, right? Blank.io will be the name of your domain, and it gives you the visibility and control over everything that happens inside of the organization. So that will be all your projects. You'll be able to see all the resource within your organization. So each workspace and cloud identity account is associated with one organization only. Right? So if you're a workspace or a cloud or a GCP customer, you will only have one organization. It allows you to enforce different policies at a organization wide, and you can have that security and governance across everything that you have in the cloud. Right? So you have your entire cloud resource hierarchy, and we have a command there for the shell, and I'll touch on that later in the video. Then we have folders. And like I said before, it's just a grouping mechanism. We keep it as simple as possible. If you could imagine a folder in any OS, you have the ability to just have folders within folders up to 10 levels deep. And you have a combination of both. You can have delegation of administration rights, where you can give some rights to some folders and some to others. And it's inherited. So it's a policy inheritance for IAM policies when you set them up at the organization level. So each folder can have different groups that are managed by other groups. And that's how you basically give access to other projects if you can. It's better to do it at this level rather than the project level, because you give a hierarchy or an inheritance point rather than managing each folder individually or each project individually. And then lastly, we have the project resource, which is the base organizing entity within GCP and is the lowest logical group of resources. This is basically where your resources are going to live, meaning your machines, your virtual machines, your Kubernetes clusters, your BigQuery services, your Cloud SQL databases, everything will live in projects. And you can track and enable billing for these projects, right? So you can manage permissions, you can manage credentials, you can enable services and APIs, which is how Google Cloud operates. And yes, this is basically the lowest of the hierarchy in the nodes. And then we jump to something very important, and this is when it gets a little bit complicated, but don't worry, we're here for this. The billing account is basically to define who pays for what, given a set resources. So this is basically how you attach payment profiles to different projects, right? So a billing account always includes a payment instrument, which is how you charge the customer. So for Google to charge you, you have one billing account. You can have multiple billing accounts to divide however you want to deal with the bill, but it could be deployed in two ways: self-serve, which is you can create your organization, you can create the payment profile, and then it gets attached to a billing account; or invoice, which is offline, and you basically can pay through a wire, and it's more when your account is already embedded by Google Cloud, you have a relationship that is a little bit more lasting, or through a partner, right? The resource consumption is measured on rates or usage time, number of items, or feature use. That to say that is any service that you use within Google Cloud, and all of the services include some free tiers. There's some free tiers links that we'll share later today, but that will also include those credits for those free tiers. We won't ever charge you for those free tiers, but that will be reflected on the bill or the report later on the month. Now, this is just to give you an idea of how that looks. We have the domain, which is the cloud level. We have the organization. Then we have billing accounts that are associated directly to the projects. And this is very important. These are related to the projects rather than the folders, because the projects are where the actual resources are living, right? You can label the different projects with different names, but the billing account you can attach to different projects, to one project, to however many projects you want. Then you have within the projects, you have your VMs, which you can also label. So you have a better understanding of how much you're using within your department or your organization. And then that billing account gets linked to a payments profile, right? So if you want to spend some time here or pause this video, please go ahead to give an understanding of understand how Google Cloud splits that resource hierarchy. Let's double click on projects, which is the main unit of Google Cloud. Again, is the base level of organizing your entities, and it does not correspond to a particular region or geographic region. What that means is that whenever you deploy, let's say, for example, a compute engine machine. That compute engine machine could live in any region. You just have this abstract project, right? Which is to hold your resources. So I could have a compute engine in US Central and have another compute engine in US East 4, right? So that way you have all your resources in one place and you enable billing into one single place. All right, let's jump into cloud identity. Cloud identity is very important because it's the way that you authenticate and you authorize your users. And that's very important to understand how we separate those two. If you're familiar with your Gmail accounts and if you're familiar with principals and service accounts, that's what I'm going to talk about in this section. First, let's talk about authentication. How do you authenticate into Google? Most or everybody just authenticates with their Gmail account, right? But if you have your own organization, you're going to have an org, which would be an at blank.io, for example. That's how you authenticate, which is just to say, who are you, right? Who is logging into Google right now? Who's logging into this organization? And then we have this separate Cloud IAM, which is for authorization, which enables you to add different roles to those users that you previously created, right? Those users can be created within the cloud identity, and then you can add those roles and authorize it for different things within GCP. I'll touch on what those roles mean, but it's basically what can you do within the platform. So can you delete a project? Can you add a compute engine machine? Can you create a table within BigQuery? Those kinds of roles. Let's go over the type of user accounts. The first one is consumer users, and the second one will be organization managed users. Consumer users is everything that ends in a Gmail account, gmail.com. Users that have this are basically managed by Google, and you have no control over how we manage the deployment and everything. It's basically you can access that user and use it for your Google Cloud platform or whatever. However, though, having said that, we recommend avoiding using Gmail accounts for your GCP. Why, you may ask? If it's a company, you don't want a Gmail account to be associated with your organization. First, it allows other companies to vet that you're actually a valid domain. And second, it also enables us to build a reputation of your company as well. As you may understand, within cloud, there's a lot of fraud, and to keep that as transparent as possible, it's easier to manage organization, manage users. It's easier for you to understand who is within your organization. So users with the creation and authentication options are managed by you or your organization. So organization manage users are highly recommended for the platform, because that way you can audit, you can control, and you can have those security measures in place and understanding who is accessing your platform at any time. Here we have two consoles for user access management. The first one would be the admin.google.com. And if you're familiar with Google Workspace, which is everything that includes your documents, your Gmail, everything that doesn't have to do with GCP, which is the Google Cloud Platform, is managed through Google, admin.google.com. Here is where you can add new users to your organization. So you can have blank at .io, but you could have like admin at blank.io, right? You can create groups, you can create OUs. Is equivalent of having Active Directory within Google Admin. So this is how you manage your groups. This is how you manage your organizational units. And then you use that also for accessing your Gmail, every product that is underneath below here. So Google Photos, Gmail, anything. Now, the other side of the coin is console.cloud.google.com. This is specifically for your Google Cloud Platform's resources. So anything that has to do with your roles and authorization within the platform has to be managed through here. So I'll give you an example. You can create a user within Google Admin, and then that Google Admin, you can add it within Cloud IAM on GCP. And I give a quick example of that in a minute. All right, so let's move on to users and groups. Within the admin.google.com, you can create different groups of management, right? So you have your groups for administrators, right? The people who can actually use or manage the organization. And Google admin roles only manage aspects of cloud identity. So like user group management, and they're very different from Google Cloud roles. So to give an example, an admin role within Google Admin may be something like you can add or delete users within your organization. A role within GCP or in Cloud IAM will be something like, can you create projects within GCP? Can you create BigQuery tables? Can you create databases? It's not going to be related to the actual organization, but rather your control over your projects that live in your organization within GCP, right? So these are the main differences between the two. Here's a more graphic way of thinking about this. You may have your manual control of your API. So you have your user groups, you have your APIs, which is like Gmail and so on. Maybe you upload a file to your Gmail or your Drive. Then you manage your users through Cloud Identity, which is admin.google.com. You can add new users, create new users, create groups, create OUs. And then once you have that set up, you can jump to Cloud IAM. Cloud IAM will basically give you the ability to create new roles or assign specific roles to either create new machines, manage your Google Cloud resources in general. So if it's a bucket that you need to work with, or if it's a pub sub infrastructure that you need to manage, you can do that directly through Cloud IAM. So Cloud IAM is your go-to for all roles within GCP. All right. With that, I'm going to jump to Cloud IAM. Cloud IAM is the GCP control panel for everything that has to do with authorization within GCP. It lets you manage the access and define who that person is and what access and what organization can they access, right? So it lets you adopt that security principle of the least privilege. So you always, when you add a principal, you want to give only what is necessary for that person or principal to do its job. So you can grant access to cloud entity members, which are the following types. You can have a Google Cloud account, which is, in this example, john.doe@yourcompany.com. You could have service accounts. You could have Google Groups. You could have Google Workspace domain or Cloud Entity domain. So you could have a full domain to give access to Cloud IAM. Now, For example, service accounts are accounts that are not managed by a person, right? A person doesn't log into that account, but rather you can impersonate that service account, or if you want to automate a service or a process within GCP, you can use service accounts, hence the name service. Google Groups, you can add multiple groups to or multiple principals to that group, and then have that group be given a set of rules. So you don't have to control each and individual principal roles manually. So this is a quick overview of what that looks like. So you have the identity up in the top. You have the user account, which you created in Google Admin. Then you have that inside a group. And then you may have a service account, which also belongs to another group or the same group. The best practice is to give those names, a specific name to, let's say, for a service account, to understand that that service account is an actual service account. Within GCP, you have the ability to create those service accounts and also have a quick memo of what they are and understand what that is or what that is doing. Now, you have the IAM rules, which is who can do what, who can edit what, right? And then each of these, so in this example, we have John, we have GCP app dev add service account. And then we can give it, hey, you can edit, and then you tell it what resources you can use it on, right? So if you want to be able to delete or make compute instances, you can. And then that role will be, you can create compute instances, and you'll see the roles whenever you're setting it up. And then lastly, you can set up different conditions. You can set it that you can only work between Monday and Friday, which are weekdays or weekends or whatever. So we have full granularity over the authorization rules within GCP. We have everything under the control of Cloud IAM, which is completely separate from your organizational user accounts or administrators. So you could have something like a finance principal that is only dealing with finance and only has access to GCP, to Google Cloud. And then you could have something like a person that is in marketing that doesn't necessarily need to touch GCP at all. They can deal with Gmail and all the other consumer products, right? So that's a quick overview of what IAM policy is. Let's go over what types of roles we have. The first one is the perimeter role, which is the legacy role that it spans over multiple services. You can have owner, editor, and viewer roles, and each of those are very broad, and that's where we try to avoid those. A lot of people just try to have like a super user as owner, for example, of a project, to have basically God level roles or God level power over a project. Then you have editor and viewer roles, which are more limited, which I also recommend over owner. Overall, we do not recommend these unless you absolutely are comfortable with that, or if it's a super user. If it's someone that just needs to have like viewer or a role of observer, you can give it viewer roles. They have no power over what they can delete or what they can deploy. So that one is okay if you need to give viewership to someone within your organization. Then we have predefined roles, which is more fine-grained access. So I give you an example. If it's something like BigQuery, you can give it a predefined role of being a user of BigQuery, which means you can use whatever data sets you have within that BigQuery service, right? But then you can delete it, you can create, you can just use it, right? And there's multiple predefined roles that you can go deeper and deeper levels of granularity. And then if none of the roles that are predefined are enough for you, you can create your own. So you can pick and choose of those predefined roles to make your own custom role if you need. Then we have service accounts, and this is very important. I know I touched a bit previously, where if you want to create an account that represents an application, that represents an application or a virtual machine, you can do that through service accounts. You can create this, and you can have a principal impersonate a service account, or have a machine or have an actual service to impersonate the service account. And that way you have that ability to control what does what within GCP. In this world of agentic AI, this is very important because you will be managing service accounts all the time, where these service accounts will have specific roles, specific actions that are allowed to be done within GCP. So you may have an agent that may be using a service account to delete different things from a bucket, or add different things to a bucket, or make an entrance in a Cloud SQL database. So things like that is basically to keep the organization and the authorities clear of who's doing what if it's not a human being, right? These service accounts are created by users or services. So you're going to see multiple service accounts that are already created, predetermined by GCP, because we work with APIs. And these APIs may be a combination of different services that make calls to different things. So just to give you an example, we have something like managed instance groups. Managed instance groups basically allow you to create groups of compute engine machines that basically span through multiple machines, but are the same over a template. So that needs a service account to basically spawn these machines. All the same, but you still need the service account to actually create the machines. So we have a couple of examples here, like project number, and we highly suggest to give it some kind of number or some kind of ID so you understand what it's doing and where it's coming from. All right, let's move on to administrative tools. And this is very important because it's the way that you administrate your Google Cloud organization and instance. So we have a couple of ways to do it. Yes, we do have a mobile app. You can actually SSH directly into the console through your mobile application. We also have the Google Cloud SDK, which is installing the SDK directly, your G Cloud commands directly in your IDE. Then we also have the Cloud Console and Shell, and we'll show you that in a minute, which is basically a little machine that is spawned directly onto your console, and you can control all of GCP directly through this shell. And then lastly, we have RESTful API. So if you don't want to bother with anything of the UI or the shell or the SDK, you can talk through it directly through RESTful APIs. And we try to give you as many features as possible within this API so you can control everything through APIs. So let's touch on each. This is a quick example of how you can manage Google Cloud. We have a set of tools that include gcloud, gsutil, BigQuery, for example, that each manage different things. gcloud you can actually use to create different things like compute engine or create Google Cloud storage buckets. It enables you to have that quick command line into creating things or managing your Google Cloud organization. We have different client libraries. So if you want to use Java or Python or Node.js, you can, and you can install each one of those separately. And then it also has emulators that allow you to simulate those services in like a local environment. So you can test, you can validate before you deploy it onto your application. Then we have your Google Cloud Shell, and this is part of the Google Cloud Console. I'll show you that in a minute. It is basically a temporary Debian based, which it means that even though the machine is temporary, you'll have that persistent disk. And we give you 5 gigs of persistent disk storage. This is completely free. It's not something that you pay extra for using on GCP. It is pre-installed with all Google Cloud SDK, so you don't have to install Google Cloud SDK on this shell. And then you can have web preview functionality, which basically if you want to test something, let's say, for example, a Python application, you can open up a port 8080 and it'll literally open up a window for you to connect to that machine. Then you have built-in organization access, so you don't have to authenticate directly on your console. You can change users within the console, and it gives you basically a window of command line into GCP. Very, very important and very useful to do. All right. So now that we have all the definitions and all the essentials covered, I want to go over AI with Google. And this is basically just an overview of what we have as AI is built in our DNA. So let's start talking about what we offer. Right? Let's start with building blocks, which is two different things. We have Google AI Studio and we have Vertex AI Studio. Let's dive deep into what Google AI Studio is. It's super fast to get going with Gemini. Is a developer tool where you can start using our APIs, you can start prototyping, you can launch apps very quickly with API keys, and you can share your data with Google for model or service improvement. But it is the fastest way to get Gemini working. Now, that being said, if you want something more enterprise and for developers to scale your application, you can go onto Vertex AI Studio on GCP. So Google AI Studio is outside of the GCP platform. So that is the biggest difference. And then Vertex AI Studio, it is living within GCP. So you have the enterprise ready AI platform where you can create your own applications, you can bring your own models, you can serve them directly from Vertex. You can have your privacy policy set. We have the indemnity protection for using our models. We have BPC service controls. We have everything that our enterprise application would need. So that would be Vertex AI Studio. We also have tools to customize your models, augment, train your models, and serve them all from one stop shop, which is Vertex AI Studio. Here is an overview of everything that is included in Vertex AI. Gemini 2.5 came out, but basically you have access to all of these models and third-party models as well. But we have Google foundational models like Imagen, now 4, Chirp, Cody, embeddings. We have all the Google task-specific models, which is vision or translation, speech to text. Then we have Google domain specific models like MetalM and SecLM. And then we have lastly the partner models. So all the Claude models, Llama models are usually in Vertex AI Model Garden within days or on the same day that is announced. And then we also have, open source models like Gemma or Llama, right? So all these models are available as fast as possible in our platform, and you can use them all directly through Vertex AI. Here are the two Google models that we have, or the Google family models. Gemini, which is our largest and the most capable AI model that we have right now, 2.5 Pro. And then we have Gemma, which is our open models. You can download this model, play with the weights, train it however you want. There is small enough model that you can load onto your phone, but these are the two state-of-the-art family of models that Google offers right now. All right, and with that, I want to give you guys a little tour of the console so you guys are familiarized with how Google Cloud's platform is set up. And with that, I usually look first at how to start with Google Cloud. Here is basically how I would start if I was a startup on Google Cloud. I would go directly into Google Cloud setup if I can, and then start with one of these three: proof of concept, production, enhanced security. Most of startups do not need all the rest from here. You may have central logging, you may need monitoring. You can do that, but you probably won't use shared VPCs right off the bat, or hybrid connectivity, organizational policies, maybe. So I understand that a lot of people might want to go directly into production, but let's dive into proof of concept. And I may have done a couple of these, but the first one would be creating an organization. And this is very important because a lot of customers may create an account and it just grows without an organization, right? This organization might be created through either Cloud Identity or Workspace, and then you can admin the credentials for your users. We touched on that earlier in the video. So who performs this, right? The person who's going to be the super administrator. This is the person who's going to have God level permissions to the organization, and whoever has access to those DNS configurations of your domain. So you can set up your option if you're a new customer, or if you're a previous customer of Workspace, or if you're a current Cloud Identity customer. You'll follow this, and I assure you that you're going to have the smoothest experience with Google Cloud. You can sign up for Google Cloud Identity. I have done this already, so I can jump directly into the next step, which is billing. Right now, I can create different principles. If you create, groups. So whenever you click on continue to billing, it's going to create groups that allow you to add users to it. And that way you can manage billing just by adding users, or the person or the people who can access billing to those groups. Is the easiest way to do this, because it allows you to not worry about who can manage what and who can do what. So if I create these groups, it'll automatically add the IAM roles, which are all these. All right. And then I have the groups created and the billing task is pending. I can continue to billing, and I can identify my billing account. For example, this is my billing account, and I can continue, and I can confirm my billing account. Notice that I have no users have access to the billing account. That's fine for now because I already have access to somewhere else. And then we can continue to deploy, right? So as I mentioned before, we have the organization node here. So for example, this is my organization node. Then we have a project folder, and then we have a project. right? This is a resource hierarchy, and this is the simplest way to get going, right? If I click deploy, it'll create a project. I already have a project, so I don't want to deal with that right now. And then you have different organizational policies. So things like maybe you want to add users from somewhere else, you can do that. Maybe you want to give public access. You can always modify this. I can't modify this because I'm not the super user of my specific organization. So I can only touch some of these, but you should be able to touch on most of these if you want. Then you click deploy and you're literally ready to go with Google Cloud. Now, the other thing that you can work on is APIs, right? So these APIs are basically what control Google Cloud. And you can check anytime by just searching here APIs. And that way you can see what your APIs or which APIs are enabled. You see everything that it's enabled, and you see the requests and the number of errors and everything. But you have a library of things that you can enable, right? And within here, you can search whatever you need and you can enable that. So if you do not enable that, nobody can use it, right? That way we have full authority of who's using what within our project. All right. Something else that I wanted to show you is the shell. And the shell is, like I mentioned, a small little machine that runs in GCP and you can use for any of your needs within GCP. So I'm going to wait for this to provision. And meanwhile, I'm going to come out here and expose my Gemini Cloud Assist. So this is really cool because you can actually ask questions about how to do things in GCP to Gemini. So things like, how do I change Kubernetes cluster controls for kubectl, for example, right? So can you give me the command to change clusters in GK through Cloud Shell? So anytime that you have a doubt about how to use something in GCP, you can ask Gemini instead of going crazy Googling for things, which you can totally can. But this already gave me the commands that I need to run for anything that I need to do in GCP, right? So for example, here I have a cluster called KubeDoom, so I'm going to change that. I have a zone. Let me skip that. And I can give it the project ID. My project ID will be the name of my project, which is this project -2. Lastly, I wanted to chat about startup credits. With these credits, we allow startups to grow within GCP. So here's a quick run through of the journey of different startups within GCP. We have the formation, which is if you have maybe a couple of founders, you're prototyping your tool or your application or your product itself. We can give you $2,000 to start here. That will be to just getting to GCP and start using that money to actually run your application, run your VMs. Then we have the ecosystem tier, which is 25K. You're building an MVP, you're fundraising, and you're testing in the market, and you're iterating with that project. Then our most famous program is Google for Startups Scale Up program. So you're now in pre-seed or seeds, or in your Series A, right? You get $100,000 in credits the first year, or up to 250K if you're an AI company, and you can use those for any first-party tool within GCP. So that could be Gemini calls, that could be running your compute engine, that could be using your GPUs within GCP. Anything that would be covered by this would be first-party Google Cloud tooling. So BigQuery is also covered. Anything that you might be needing from GCP would be there. Something that is explicitly excluded is marketplace. So if you want to use your credits to run your application, you can. And then you have the marketplace, which is completely separate and it's not included in the credits. And then lastly, once you start expanding, there's different things that we can provide to you with reservations and contracts that basically give you credits for a certain amount of commitment with Google Cloud, but it's to allow you to actually grow and start having that market durability and having your clients to start committing to a larger contract with Google Cloud. You'll build better discounts with a commitment. But this is basically what a startup journey is. You'll definitely have multiple questions about this, but for that, you can actually go to Google Cloud. If you scan this QR code, you'll be able to apply for the program. You'll see the benefits of each program, and you can connect to the startup success team and then get training resources directly from the startup success team. This is also part of the school, so you'll get access to these videos as well. And thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.